My name is Alex. I am a brother, uncle, husband, and I also have borderline personality disorder. I hope that doesn't change your view of me. Many people, when they hear borderline personality disorder, they think, oh, they're crazy, they're psychotic, they have no control of their emotions. And that's because the media has stigmatized it, and I don't know if anybody's seen some of the documentaries or the movies, 13 Reasons Why, that girl supposedly had borderline. However, it's a gross misrepresentation of people with BPD. I'm going to call it BPD from now on, just to let you guys know, because way less time than borderline. The first thing about borderline that I'd like to explore is, what is it? Borderline personality disorder is a disorder of instability and problems with emotions. People with borderline are unstable in their emotions, their thinking, their relationships, their identity, everything is pretty much unstable. And that is from the Borderline Personality Disorder, the Survival Guide, written by Alexander Chapman, which is actually kind of funny, with the same first name. So the scariest part about borderline, and this is so hard to explain to people that don't think like I do, cognitive distortions, black or white thinking, right or wrong, all or nothing. We don't see a gray area. To us, we either love something or we hate it, which explains why I love The Flash and hate anybody that doesn't. It's extreme emotion all the time for everything in life. And another scary part about borderline is because of all of this here and there, up and down, your brain gets tired. It's like, what's going on, man? And that's where dissociation comes into play. Dissociation is a mental process of disconnecting from your thoughts, feelings, memories, identity. Have you ever watched yourself argue with your wife? I have. You completely remove yourself. You're too stressed out. Your brain's shutting down. It's terrifying. It's happening. It's real. You're not hallucinating. But you're just not there. You're over here trying to figure out what the hell you're doing over here. But the problem is, while borderline, I could tell you 75 times a year, I could tell you every day for the rest of your life how painful it is to have borderline. Because it is. The best way I've ever heard borderline explained is that it's like you have third-degree burns all over your emotional skin. Every touch is painful. But the most painful part about borderline is that we're already suffering, and the stigma causes more. Whenever my parents found out that I had borderline, they wanted nothing to do with me. They were so upset that they had messed up so bad as a parent or whatever, that I had borderline, so that must mean I was broken and defective and I would never be able to have good relationships. Ask my wife about our relationship. It's hard. She doesn't see things the way I see things, and sometimes I have to be like, okay, you know what? You might actually be thinking the right way. But we have a successful relationship. I've had the same best friend for 15 years. Obviously, we're capable of making and keeping relationships. But because of stigma, when my wife's mom heard I had borderline, she told her to leave me. Her mom loved me until that point. Why did she do that? Because she's uneducated. She's uneducated about the fact that people with borderline, it's literally a personality disorder. That's it. That's all. We can't help it. It's not like anybody wakes up and goes, you know what? I'm borderline today. Because it sucks. It's miserable. You feel everything on an intensity that nobody else can. And you can't explain to people why it hurts so bad that you dropped your book in the hall. And you can't explain to your wife why it's so frustrating to you that she wouldn't just let you get the gingerbread men at the store. You have breakdowns over stuff like that. Back to the stigma, though. I don't know if you see in the picture, it has different words. It says borderline, emptiness, anxiety. But borderline people do self-harm. Most borderline people have self-harm, have attempted suicide. Actually, in fact, 70% of all borderline people attempt suicide by their 20s. That's 70 out of 100 people. And I'm one of them. I've attempted suicide 3 times. And thankfully I made it each time. But 10% of that 70 don't. Because they're not being treated. Or they are being treated and nobody knows what they're talking about. Or they're being treated horribly by family who think that there's some defective monster. That's not what borderline is. Another thing about borderline that we don't think about sometimes is that 75% of all borderline, people that have borderline, excuse my wording, are female. And that is according to Katie Butler with Beyond, Revolution on the Horizon. And the same amount have been sexually assaulted. That's right. 75% are female and 75% have been sexually assaulted. And that's terrifying. Are we seeing a pattern here? Moving on. The solution. Education. It's the solution to everything. I will scream this from the top of the hills. Education is what has to happen. Understanding borderline. You can see some of these things up here as like always feeling guilty, the ability to cut someone out of our life. You ever had a friend that was just like dropped off the face of the earth? They didn't want anything to do with you and you didn't know what you did wrong? They could have been suffering from borderline. We think you're either with us or against us. You show any form of being against us, bye. And I'm not saying that they're like that their whole life. This is the immediate thought. But there's treatment for borderline. The solution continued, being there, just like these cute little birds are there for each other. You have no idea how important it is to fight it out with the person that you love that has borderline. I'm not saying it's easy. There's a million books you can read on it. And my wife has read all of them plus 5. She would do anything to make sure that she understood my borderline. And it's been very hard for her. There have been times where I haven't been fair to her, times that I'm ashamed of. And not because I wanted to hurt her, not out of malice, but because I'm hurting so bad on the inside from this pain that I can't even pinpoint. It's like being angry all the time for existing, and then being anxious about that anger. The next part of the solution is hope. And that, as we all heard last time, is the most important part about the Flash. And here is where you guys will learn why the Flash means so much to me. When he stands for hope, he says there's a better day. Marsha Stratton, I believe, was quoted in Beyond the Horizon, or Revolution on the Horizon, by Katie Butler. Marsha Chapman, that's what it was. She was very big into the processing of borderline and understanding it when it was not a thing. Like when people were just like, no, they're just insane. She said, life is not always going to be so painful and you're not always going to hurt so bad. If you can just keep yourself alive, you're going to get to be a more normal person who has a life that's worth living. And that's true. I got diagnosed with borderline 3 years ago. And when I first got diagnosed with borderline, I fought it tooth and nail. I didn't want to have borderline. Borderline's gross. But then when you accept that you have it and you get the treatment you need, all of a sudden, relationships make more sense. And it makes more sense, okay, well, yeah, I guess she wouldn't freak out about gingerbread men like I would because her brain doesn't do that. It's not really that big of a deal if I drop my book in the hallway. My brain's just telling me that I'm a failure for that. In conclusion, when people hear borderline, they hear negative. They hear out of control. But we're not. Yeah, we're hurting. Sometimes you even hear things like borderline people are manipulative. And we're not. We're hurting, we're in pain, but we are working hard to get out of there. I couldn't be in college right now if I hadn't been treated for my borderline. If I hadn't accepted that I had it, I couldn't be in this classroom. But I am. The solution to borderline is education, being there, and hope. Just as the solution to almost every problem is hope, unfortunately. When there's nothing else, there's always hope. And also, borderline is something, this is part of the hope. Borderline is not a forever condition. You can go through enough therapy and work hard enough so that it doesn't stay with you forever. And that's the part of hope that we're working on. I hope everyone sees borderline people just a little bit differently today.